Picture this. You've been doing everything right for 2 years. You got serious about money. You stopped eating out every night. You set up automatic transfers to your savings account. You started investing. You actually read the articles instead of just bookmarking them. And then you check your balance one afternoon and you have maybe $11,000 to show for it. After 2 years of discipline and sacrifice and telling yourself no on a daily basis. And you think, is this actually working? Because it doesn't feel like it's working. Here's the thing. It is working. You're just in the hardest part, the part nobody warns you about, the part where the math is technically on your side, but it doesn't feel that way yet, because you haven't crossed the threshold where compounding stops being a concept and starts being something you can actually see in your bank account. That threshold has a number, and that number is $100,000.
My name is X.
And I spend probably too much time thinking about money, psychology, and why the conventional advice people give about building wealth leaves out the most important piece, which is what the early years actually feel like and why they feel that way. If you've ever wondered whether you're doing this right, even when it doesn't seem like it's paying off, make sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people find it. Now, let's talk about what's actually happening when you're in that early accumulation phase, because once you understand the mechanics, the whole thing looks completely different. You've probably heard the phrase compound interest before. It gets thrown around so often that it's almost lost all meaning. People say it like it's a magic spell, like if you just believe in compound interest hard enough, the money will figure itself out. But here's what most explanations skip over. Compounding is not magic, it's multiplication. And multiplication has a basic requirement that nobody talks about. You need something to multiply. That sounds obvious when I say it out loud, but think about what it means in practice. If you have $1,000 invested and you earn 10% in a year, you made $100. $100. That's a nice lunch, not a life-changing amount of money. And the problem isn't your return rate. The problem is that 10% of something small is still something small. Now, contrast that with someone who has $500,000 invested at the exact same 10% return. Same market conditions, same year. They made $50,000 without doing a single thing. That's more than a lot of people earn from a full year of actual work. The percentage is identical. The result is unrecognizable. This is the fundamental reality that makes the early phase of wealth building so mentally exhausting. You're doing the same things as the people further along. You're being just as disciplined, just as patient, just as smart. But the outputs look nothing like theirs because the base is too small for the compounding to be visible yet. And here's where $100,000 becomes meaningful. Not because it's a round number, not because someone put it on a poster, but because around that level, the returns from your investments start to feel like something real. At 10%, $100,000 earns you $10,000 a year. That's a meaningful contribution. That's roughly the same as adding another $800 a month to your income, except you didn't have to work for it at all. Before that point, compounding is basically theoretical. After it, you can actually see it happening. That's the shift, and it changes everything. But here's what's interesting. The hardest part of building your first $100,000 isn't actually the math, it's the psychology. Think about what the early phase of saving and investing actually looks like from the inside. You're making sacrifices that are immediate and concrete. You're not going on that trip. You're not buying that thing. You're not upgrading your apartment. And the reward for those sacrifices is an account balance that goes up by maybe $400 this month. And your brain, which is very good at noticing when effort and reward feel proportional, starts sending up a quiet signal that says, "This doesn't seem worth it." That signal is wrong, but it feels very right. There's a concept in behavioral economics called hyperbolic discounting, which is basically a fancy way of saying that humans are wired to value things in the present far more heavily than things in the future. A dollar today feels worth more than a dollar next year, even if intellectually you know that's not rational. This is why diets fail, why people don't exercise consistently, and why most people never build real savings. The sacrifice is now, the payoff is later, and later is a place our brains don't naturally trust. The people who get to $100,000 aren't necessarily people who have somehow overridden this instinct completely. They've just found ways to make the process feel real in the present. Maybe they track their net worth obsessively. Maybe they have a very specific goal attached to the money. Maybe they've connected saving to an identity they want, the kind of person who is good with money rather than just a number they're trying to reach. Because here's the thing about identity. When you see saving as a temporary behavior, something you're doing until you reach a goal, you're constantly fighting against your own nature. But when saving becomes part of who you are, the decisions start to feel automatic. You don't have to argue with yourself every month about whether to transfer money to your investment account. It just happens, the same way you don't argue with yourself about whether to brush your teeth. That identity shift is honestly more valuable than any specific saving strategy. And the interesting part is that it doesn't usually come first. It comes from doing the thing, from watching the number go up month after month, even slowly, and building a track record of being someone who follows through. The identity is the result of the behavior, not the prerequisite for it. Okay, let's run some actual numbers, because I think seeing them laid out makes this a lot more concrete. Say you earn $55,000 a year. You're living reasonably, not extravagantly, not like a monk, and you manage to save $500 per month. That's $6,000 a year going into your investment account. You invest it in something boring and diversified that historically returns about 8% annually. In year one, your investment account grows by roughly $6,500. The extra $500 is your market return, barely noticeable. In year 5, you have about $37,000. Your account grew by roughly $8,500 that year, $6,000 from your contributions and about $2,500 from returns. The compounding is starting to exist, but it's still a minor contributor. Now, here's where it gets interesting. By year 10, you're somewhere around $93,000, and in that single year, your account might have grown by $12,000 or $13,000, with nearly half of that coming from returns alone, not from money you earned and saved. The compounding is now contributing nearly as much as you are. You cross $100,000 somewhere around year 11, and from that point, the trajectory looks completely different. Not because you changed anything, not because you got a raise or started investing more aggressively, just because the base finally got large enough for the multiplication to be meaningful. By year 15, you might have $175,000. By year 20, you could be looking at $290,000 or more. The same $500 a month, the same boring investment strategy, but the rate of growth has become almost unrecognizable compared to those early years. Here's the part that gets me every time. The second $100,000 takes roughly 4 years to accumulate after you hit the first one. The third $100,000 takes about 3 years. The fourth takes about 2.5. The compounding doesn't just help, it accelerates. The machine gets faster as it gets bigger, and the only way to get to the fast part is to survive the slow part. Charlie Munger, who spent more time thinking about wealth accumulation than almost any human in history, said this: "The first $100,000 is a bitch." He didn't mince words, and his advice was simple: just get there. Do whatever it takes. Scratch and claw if you have to, because the math on the other side is a completely different conversation. Hype versus reality. Now I want to talk about something that the financial content world doesn't do a great job of addressing, which is the gap between what wealth building looks like in theory and what it feels like in practice. In theory, it looks like a chart that goes up and to the right forever. In theory, compound interest is this beautiful, inevitable force that rewards patience and discipline. In theory, anyone who starts early and stays consistent will build substantial wealth over time. All of that is true, by the way. I'm not here to tell you the system is broken or that the advice is wrong. But in practice, it looks like watching your balance go from $23,000 to $24,400 over 12 months of disciplined saving and thinking, okay, so I gave up a lot of things I wanted this year and I have $1,400 to show for it. In practice, it looks like your coworker who spends freely and drives a nicer car than you somehow seems fine, and you wonder if you're making the right trade-off. In practice, it looks like opening your investment app during a market correction and seeing 2 years of savings apparently evaporating in a few weeks. The motivational side of personal finance will tell you, stay the course. Time in market beats timing the market. Trust the process. And again, true, all true. But it doesn't help you in the moment because it doesn't explain why things feel the way they feel. And when you don't understand the why, those feelings can override the logic. People sell when markets drop not because they forgot the advice, but because the advice never gave them a framework for interpreting what they were experiencing. Understanding the compounding mechanics does something that motivational advice can't. It lets you look at a slow year and say correctly, this is what year 4 is supposed to look like, instead of this isn't working. Those are two completely different responses to the same situation. One keeps you in the game, one gets you out of it.
There's also something worth saying about comparison. Social media has made it genuinely hard to maintain a realistic view of where you are in your financial journey because you're constantly seeing the highlight reel of everyone else's. The friend who made a killing on a specific stock, the person your age who just bought a house, the 26-year-old with the Tesla and the apparent disposable income. What you're not seeing is the debt behind some of those pictures, the family money, the risk that hasn't blown up yet, the years of boring, consistent work that preceded the visible results. Comparison is one of the most reliable ways to talk yourself out of a strategy that's actually working. Here's something that I find genuinely fascinating about the $100,000 milestone. It doesn't just change your finances, it changes the way you think about your entire relationship with work. When you have nothing saved, your job is everything. It's not just how you earn money, it's your only source of financial security, which means you're negotiating from a place of near total dependence. You'll put up with bad management because you need the paycheck. You'll stay in a role that's going nowhere because leaving feels terrifying. You'll accept the first salary offer because you can't afford the risk of walking away. When you have $100,000, your job is still important. You still need income, but the dynamic is subtly, fundamentally different. You have runway, you have options. You could, theoretically, survive for a year or more without employment income while you figured out your next move. You probably won't need to, but knowing you could changes everything about how you show up in professional situations. You negotiate better. You're more willing to advocate for yourself because you're not operating from desperation. You're more likely to leave a bad situation before it damages you professionally or mentally because you can afford to be selective about your next opportunity instead of grabbing the first lifeboat. I know someone who spent years in a job that was slowly making them miserable. Tolerable pay, terrible culture, basically no upward trajectory. Every time they thought about leaving, they'd do the math and feel stuck, until the year they hit $100,000 saved. They handed in their notice 2 months later, not because they had another job lined up, they didn't, but because they finally had enough financial cushion to walk towards something better instead of running away from something scary. They found a better position within 4 months and took a $15,000 pay increase. The savings didn't get them the job, but they created the conditions that made it possible to get the job. That's the thing about money that the purely mathematical view of personal finance misses. The value of savings isn't just in the number, it's in what the number does to your psychology, to your confidence, to your decision-making, to your willingness to take the kinds of risks that actually accelerate your progress. So let's bring this back to where we started. That person checking their balance and wondering if 2 years of discipline is actually paying off. Here's what I'd want them to know. The fact that it doesn't feel like it's working is not evidence that it isn't working. It's just evidence that you're in the early phase of a process where the results are invisible at first and then suddenly very obvious. The compounding engine is running, it's just running on a base that's too small to produce visible results yet. The goal isn't to feel rich, not yet. The goal right now is to build a base large enough for the math to start doing meaningful work on your behalf. And that base is somewhere around $100,000. Get there, and you're playing a different game. You're no longer relying entirely on your own savings contributions to build wealth. The money itself starts contributing, and that changes the math, the psychology, the career dynamics, and the timeline all at once. Now, I want to be real with you about something. Not everyone can save $500 a month. Some people are genuinely in situations where the margins are too thin, where the income is too low, where the expenses are legitimately non-optional. If that's you, this video isn't dismissing that reality. The $100,000 threshold is real, but so is the fact that reaching it requires a certain level of financial stability to begin with. Increasing your income when possible helps too. But the most important thing you can do if you're earlier in this journey is simply not stop. Even $100 a month consistently builds the habit, and the habit is what eventually becomes the foundation. The person you become while grinding through the slow, early phase, the one who has learned to delay gratification, to stay consistent when the results are invisible, to understand why you're doing what you're doing, that person is more valuable than the account balance they're building, because that person knows how to build wealth, which means even if something happened and the money disappeared, they'd build it again. That's the real milestone, not the number, the person you are when you reach it. If this video helped clarify something about where you are in your own financial journey, consider hitting subscribe. I put out new videos every week on money, psychology, and the things most financial content doesn't bother to explain. And if you know someone who's in that frustrating early phase wondering if any of this is worth it, send them this video. It might be exactly what they need to hear right now.